The storm had been raging across the New Mexico territory for 3 days, turning the normally dry arroyos into rushing torrents and the desert roads into rivers of mud. Ranch owner Sam Garrett had spent most of those 3 days battling to keep his cattle from wandering into danger, his fences from washing away, and his buildings from losing their roofs to the howling wind. At 58, Sam was a weathered man who had seen every kind of challenge the frontier could throw at him. He had survived drought, flood, Indian raids, cattle rustlers, and the heartbreak of losing his wife Margaret to consumption 10 years earlier. His ranch, the Double Eagle, was a testament to his determination and skill, a prosperous operation that had made him one of the most respected men in the territory. But success and respect hadn't filled the emptiness that Margaret's death had left in his heart. Their marriage had been childless, much to their sorrow, and Sam had spent the last decade rattling around in a house that felt too big for one person, eating meals in silence and wondering if the rest of his life would be nothing but solitary survival. On this particular stormy afternoon, Sam was making his way back to the house from the barn when he noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. One of his supply wagons, which had been parked near the back of the house for repairs, was showing signs of recent disturbance. The canvas covering had been pulled aside in one corner, and there were small footprints in the mud leading to and from the wagon bed. Sam approached the wagon carefully, unsure what or who he might find sheltering underneath it. Given the territorial tensions with various Apache bands, any unexpected presence on his ranch required cautious investigation. But as he drew closer, he heard something that made his heart clench with unexpected emotion. The sound of a child crying. Sam lifted the canvas covering and peered into the dim space beneath the wagon. What he found there would change his life forever. Huddled against the wagon wheel, soaked through and shivering with cold, was an Apache girl who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. She was dressed in traditional clothing that was now torn and muddy, her long black hair plastered to her head by the rain. But it was her eyes that stopped Sam's breath, large, dark, and filled with a terror so profound that it made him want to weep. The child had clearly been alone for some time. She was painfully thin, her cheeks hollow with hunger, and there were scratches and bruises on her exposed skin that spoke of a desperate journey through harsh country. Most heartbreaking of all was the way she pressed herself against the wagon wheel when she saw Sam, as if trying to make herself invisible despite knowing she had been discovered. For a moment, Sam and the little girl simply stared at each other. Sam could see her trying to decide whether to run or fight, her small body tensed for flight despite her obvious exhaustion. But there was nowhere for her to go. She was too weak to run far, and the storm was too fierce for anyone to survive. Exposure much longer. Sam had encountered Apache children before, usually in formal meetings with tribal leaders or during the tense negotiations that occasionally took place between white settlers and various bands. But he had never seen a child in such desperate circumstances, and every paternal instinct he possessed roared to life at the sight of her distress. "Easy, little one," Sam said softly, his voice carrying the same gentle tone he used with frightened horses. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't respond, but Sam hadn't expected her to. He could see the intelligence in her eyes, the way she was assessing him and his intentions with the survival instincts of someone far too young to need such skills. Sam slowly lowered himself to sit cross-legged in the mud, making himself appear less threatening while bringing his face to her level. The rain continued to pour down around them, but Sam ignored his own discomfort as he focused entirely on the terrified child before him. "You must be cold and hungry," Sam said gently, noting the way her eyes fixed on his mouth as he spoke, as if she was trying to read his intentions from his expressions rather than his words. "Would you like to come inside where it's warm and dry?" The girl's response was to press herself even more tightly against the wagon wheel, clearly torn between her desperate need for shelter and her fear of the strange white man who had found her hiding place. Sam understood her dilemma perfectly. In her experience, white men probably represented danger, capture, or worse, but she was also smart enough to recognize that staying outside in the storm would likely mean death from exposure. "I have food," Sam said quietly, and warm clothes, and a soft bed where you can sleep safely. No one will hurt you in my house. As Sam spoke, he was struck by a feeling he had never experienced before, an immediate, powerful sense of recognition and protectiveness that seemed to come from the deepest part of his soul. Looking at this frightened, vulnerable child, he didn't see a stranger or a potential problem to be solved. He saw something that took his breath away. He saw his daughter. The realization hit Sam with the force of a physical blow. This little girl, with her dark eyes and brave spirit and desperate need for safety, felt like family in a way that transcended logic or cultural boundaries. It was as if he had been waiting his entire life to find her, and she had been waiting her entire short life to be found by him. "Sweetheart," Sam said, the endearment coming as naturally as breathing, "I know you're scared, and I know you don't know me, but I want you to understand something very important." Sam leaned forward slightly, wanting the girl to see the sincerity in his eyes. "From this moment on, you're not alone anymore. You're my daughter now, and I'm going to take care of you for the rest of your life." The words surprised Sam even as he spoke them, but they felt more true than anything he had ever said. This wasn't a decision born of pity or charity. It was a recognition of something that already existed, a bond that had formed the instant he had looked into her frightened eyes. The girl stared at Sam with obvious amazement, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Sam could see her trying to process not just his words, but the tone in which he spoke them. The unmistakable sound of a parent addressing a beloved child. "Daughter," Sam repeated softly, testing the word and finding that it fit perfectly. "That's what you are now, my daughter, and daughters don't have to be afraid or cold or hungry, because their fathers take care of them." Whether the girl understood his specific words or simply recognized the love and protection in his voice, something in her posture began to change. The rigid tension of fear started to give way to the careful hope of someone who had been offered salvation. Sam slowly extended his hand toward the girl, not trying to grab or force her, but offering a choice. "Will you let me help you, daughter? Will you let your father take you somewhere safe and warm?" For a long moment, the girl looked at Sam's outstretched hand. Then, with the courage that only children can summon in desperate circumstances, she placed her small, cold fingers in his larger, warm palm. The moment their hands touched, Sam felt something shift in his chest, a sense of completeness he hadn't even known he was missing. This little girl, this stranger who had appeared under his wagon in the middle of a storm, felt like the missing piece of his life finally clicking into place. "There we go," Sam said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "That's my brave girl. Now let's get you inside before you catch your death of cold." Sam carefully lifted the girl from under the wagon, marveling at how light she was, how fragile. She felt in his arms. She allowed him to carry her without struggle, though he could feel the tension in her small body as she prepared to run, if this new situation proved dangerous. But as Sam carried her toward the house, speaking softly about the warm bath and hot food that awaited her, the girl seemed to relax slightly against his chest. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was the beginning of trust, but Sam felt her small body mold slightly to his embrace. "Almost there, daughter," Sam murmured as they reached the front door. "Almost home." As Sam pushed open the door to his house and carried the Apache girl across the threshold, he understood that his life had just changed in the most fundamental way possible. He had gone out to check on a wagon and had come back with a daughter, not through any legal process or careful consideration, but through the instant recognition that some bonds transcend all the barriers that society tries to place between people. The house that had felt too empty for one person suddenly felt exactly the right size for a family of two, and the man who had thought his chance for fatherhood had passed him by discovered that sometimes the family you need most arrives in the most unexpected ways, at exactly the moment when you're ready to recognize it. Sam Garrett had found a frightened Apache child hiding under his wagon in the rain, but more than that, he had found his daughter, the child he had been waiting for without even knowing it, the family that would transform his remaining years from mere survival into something rich with purpose and love. What an incredible moment of instant recognition. Sam's immediate acceptance of this little girl as his daughter shows us that true family bonds aren't always about blood. Sometimes they're about the heart instantly knowing where it belongs. If you're moved by this story of love at first sight between a father and daughter, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, so you don't miss how their beautiful relationship develops. Now, let's return to our story and see how Sam and his new daughter will build their life together. In the warm kitchen of the Double Eagle Ranch house, Sam Garrett worked with the gentle efficiency of a man who had suddenly discovered his life's true purpose. He had drawn a hot bath for the little girl, found clean clothes that could be temporarily altered to fit her small frame, and prepared a simple but nourishing meal that wouldn't overwhelm her obviously empty stomach. The girl, his daughter, Sam corrected himself, marveling at how naturally the thought came, had allowed him to help her without resistance, though he could see her watching his every move with the careful attention of someone who had learned that survival depended on accurately reading adult intentions. "There now," Sam said softly as he helped her into clothes that were far too large, but at least warm and dry. "That's much better. You're safe now, little one. No more sleeping in the rain. No more being hungry or scared." The girl looked up at him with those serious dark eyes, and Sam could see her trying to understand not just his words, but the profound change in her. Circumstances a few hours ago, she had been hiding under a wagon, cold and alone and desperate. Now she was sitting in a warm kitchen, clean and fed and safe, being cared for by a man who called her daughter with obvious sincerity. Sam pulled a chair close to the girl and sat down, wanting to be at her eye level for the conversation he knew they needed to have. "Sweetheart, I know you probably don't understand everything that's happening, but I want to explain something important to you." The girl watched him intently, and Sam could see the intelligence behind her wary expression. Whatever had happened to bring her to his ranch alone, she was clearly a smart child who understood far more than her young age might suggest. "My name is Sam," he said, pointing to himself, "and from now on, I'm your father. That means I'm going to take care of you, protect you, and love you for the rest of your life." Sam paused, trying to find words that would convey the depth of his instant commitment to this child. "I know we don't look the same, and I know we come from different people, but that doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you need a father, and I need a daughter, and somehow we found each other." The girl tilted her head slightly, and Sam thought he saw a flicker of understanding in her expression. She raised one small hand and pointed to herself, then said something in Apache that sounded like a question. "Your name," Sam guessed, and the girl nodded solemnly. She spoke again in Apache, and Sam wished desperately that he could understand her language, but there would be time to learn, time to bridge the communication gap between them. For now, the important thing was establishing trust and safety. "I'm sorry, daughter," Sam said gently. "I don't speak your language yet, but I'll learn. For now, would it be all right if I gave you a name I can say? Just until I can learn to say your real name properly?" The girl considered this request seriously, then nodded her permission. Sam thought for a moment, looking at this brave little girl who had survived circumstances he could barely imagine. "How about hope?" he suggested, "because that's what you are to me. Hope for a future I thought I'd lost. Hope for a family I thought I'd never have." The girl, Hope, seemed to understand the significance of the name. She pointed to herself and carefully repeated, "Hope, that's right," Sam said, his heart swelling with pride at her quick learning. "You're Hope, and I'm your father." Hope looked at Sam for a long moment, then did something that nearly broke his heart. She pointed to him and said, very carefully, "Father." Sam felt tears spring to his eyes at hearing the English words spoken in her soft voice. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your father now, and you're my daughter, and we're a family." Over the following days, Sam threw himself into the task of creating a home suitable for a young child with an energy and purpose he hadn't felt in years. He transformed the spare bedroom into a little girl's room, filling it with soft blankets, toys ordered from the territorial capital, and books that could help Hope learn English while he worked on learning Apache. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the territory's only female physician and a woman known for her work with diverse populations, made the journey to the Double Eagle to examine Hope and assess her health. Dr. Vasquez was also one of the few people in the area who spoke some Apache, making her invaluable in helping Sam understand his daughter's needs. She's been through significant trauma, Dr. Vasquez told Sam after her examination. She's malnourished and has some minor injuries, but nothing that won't heal with proper care. More importantly, she shows remarkable resilience for a child who has obviously endured terrible experiences. Can you tell me anything about what might have happened to her? Sam asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Dr. Vasquez spoke briefly with Hope in Apache, then turned back to Sam with a grave expression. Her family was killed in a raid by white men posing as soldiers. She's been wandering, alone for weeks, trying to find safety. She says the men who killed her family were looking for Apache children to sell to unscrupulous people. Sam felt sick at the thought of what Hope had escaped, but she's safe now. She's not going anywhere. That's what she needs to hear, Dr. Vasquez agreed. But Sam, you should know that this arrangement may face challenges from territorial authorities. There are policies about Indian children, about proper placement. Let them come. Sam said firmly, Hope is my daughter now, and I'll fight anyone who tries to take her away from me. Double quotes. Dr. Vasquez smiled at the fierce protectiveness in Sam's voice. I believe you will, and for what it's worth, I think you've given that little girl the best possible chance for healing and happiness. As weeks turned to months, Sam and Hope developed their own unique form of communication that blended English, Apache, and the universal languages of love and care. Hope proved to be an eager student, learning English with remarkable speed while teaching Sam words and phrases in Apache. More importantly, she began to trust, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence as she realized that Sam's promises of safety and love were not just words, but daily realities. Father, Hope said one evening as they sat together on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in brilliant colors. Why you choose me for daughter? The question, asked in her careful English, went straight to Sam's heart. Oh, sweetheart, he said, pulling her close against his side. I didn't choose you. My heart recognized you the moment I saw you. You were always my daughter. I just had to find you. Hope considered this seriously. My heart recognized you too, she said finally. When you say daughter first time, I feel like coming home. Sam felt tears threaten at her simple explanation of the bond that had formed between them so instantaneously and completely. That's exactly right, Hope. We came home to each other. The challenges came, as Dr. Vasquez had predicted, in the form of Territorial Agent Marcus Whitmore, who arrived at the ranch 6 months after Hope's arrival with official papers and rigid ideas about proper Indian placement procedures. Mr. Garrett, Agent Whitmore announced, I'm here to collect the Apache child you've been harboring without proper authorization. She needs to be placed in an appropriate educational facility. Sam, who had been expecting this confrontation, met the agent on his front porch with Hope standing beside him. At 7 years old, she had grown strong and confident under Sam's care, her eyes bright with health and happiness instead of the desperate fear they had held. When he first found her, Agent Whitmore, Sam replied calmly, You're welcome to evaluate Hope's care and education here, but she's not going anywhere. She's my legally adopted daughter. Whitmore consulted his papers with obvious frustration. Mr. Garrett, this adoption was never approved by federal authorities. Indian children are wards of the government and must be placed according to established policies. And what policies would those be? Sam asked. The ones that would take a happy, healthy child away from a loving home and put her in an institution where she'd be punished for speaking her native language and forgotten by people who see her as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. Hope moved closer to Sam's side, and he could feel her small hand slip into his larger one. The gesture was both seeking comfort and offering support. The action of a daughter who trusted her father to protect their family. Agent Whitmore, Hope, said, her English now clear and confident. This is my home. This is my father. He found me when I was lost and scared, and he made me his daughter. I don't want to go to a school where they will try to make me forget who I am. Whitmore looked taken aback by Hope's articulate response, clearly having expected to find a savage child in need of civilizing rather than a well-spoken young lady who demonstrated remarkable poise and intelligence. "Young lady," Whitmore said condescendingly, "you don't understand what's best for your future. Proper education and guidance will help you become a useful member of civilized society." Hope looked at the agent with the same careful assessment she had once used to evaluate whether Sam could be trusted. "Mr. Whitmore," she said with quiet dignity, "I can read and write into languages. I understand mathematics and geography. I know how to manage a household and care for animals. I am learning to be a bridge between two people so they can understand each other better." She paused, her grip on Sam's hand tightening slightly. "If that is not civilized, then maybe your schools need to learn what civilization really means." Sam felt his heart swell with pride at his daughter's wise and eloquent response. This remarkable child, who had once been so frightened she couldn't speak, was now confidently defending not just herself but the values and education she had received in their unconventional but loving home. The confrontation ultimately ended when Dr. Vasquez arrived with Territorial Judge Patricia Hammond, a woman known for her progressive views on family law and child welfare. After observing Hope's obvious health, happiness, and remarkable development, Judge Hammond declared that the adoption was in the child's best interests and would be legally recognized by the territory. "Agent Whitmore," Judge Hammond said firmly, "this child is clearly thriving in a loving home where she's receiving excellent care and education. Removing her would constitute harm to her welfare, which this court will not permit." As the frustrated officials departed, Sam knelt down to Hope's level and looked into the dark eyes that had captured his heart. From the very first moment he saw them, "Are you all right, daughter?" he asked gently. Hope smiled, the bright, confident smile of a child who knew beyond doubt that she was loved and protected. "I am all right, Father. We are family. Nothing can change that." Sam pulled his daughter into his arms, marveling at the journey that had brought them together and the love that had grown between them. He had found her hiding under a wagon in the rain, cold and alone and desperate. But from the very first moment he saw her, he had known exactly who she was. His daughter, the child his heart had been waiting for. The family that would transform his remaining years from solitude into joy. "That's right, Hope," Sam whispered against her hair. "We are family, and nothing will ever change that. You're my daughter, and I love you more than all the stars in the sky." As they sat together on the porch that evening, watching the same desert sunset that had witnessed their first meeting, Sam reflected on the miracle of instant love and the power of recognition that transcends all barriers. He had called her daughter before he even knew her name, and in doing so, he had spoken a truth that time would only prove more deeply. Some bonds are simply meant to be, and when we find our real family, we know it immediately and completely. 3 years after Sam Garrett first found Hope hiding under his wagon, their ranch had become a beacon of cross-cultural understanding and family love that drew visitors from across the territory. Hope, now 10 years old, had blossomed into a confident, articulate young lady who moved seamlessly between her Apache heritage and her new life, serving as a living example of how love could bridge any divide. The Double Eagle Ranch had transformed as well. What had once been the isolated home of a solitary widower was now a warm, welcoming place where Apache and Anglo visitors alike found hospitality, respect, and the kind of family bond that inspired everyone who witnessed it. But their greatest test was yet to come, in the form of a challenge that would force them to prove the depth and permanence of their connection to the world at large. The crisis began when a delegation from the Eastern Indian Reform Association arrived in the territory, led by Mrs. Constance Pemberton, a woman whose wealth and social connections had given her considerable influence over federal Indian policy. Mrs. Pemberton had heard about the regular arrangement at the Double Eagle and had come west with the express purpose of correcting what she saw as a dangerous precedent. "Mr. Garrett," Mrs. Pemberton announced during a town meeting she had demanded be held to address the situation. "While your intentions may have been charitable, you have inadvertently created a serious problem that threatens the entire structure of proper Indian management." Sam, who had attended the meeting with Hope at his side, listened patiently as Mrs. Pemberton outlined her objections to their family arrangement. But he could feel his daughter's tension as the woman spoke about her as if she were a policy problem. rather than a beloved child. Mrs. Pemberton, Sam replied calmly. I'm not sure I understand your concern. Hope is my legally adopted daughter. She's thriving in every measurable way, and she's receiving an excellent education that honors both her heritage and her future opportunities. Mrs. Pemberton consulted her notes with the authority of someone who had never doubted her own moral superiority. Mr. Garrett, you've created what amounts to a savage child masquerading as a civilized young lady. She may speak English and wear proper clothes, but she retains inappropriate attachment to primitive beliefs and practices that make her unsuitable for true integration into American society. Hope, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the serious attention she brought to all important matters, finally spoke up. Mrs. Pemberton, may I ask you a question? Mrs. Pemberton looked surprised that the child had addressed her directly, but nodded condescendingly. Very well, child. What do you think makes someone American? Hope asked with genuine curiosity. Is it the color of their skin, or the language their grandparents spoke, or is it something else? Mrs. Pemberton blinked, clearly not having expected such a sophisticated question from someone she had dismissed as a savage child. Well, that is to say, being American means embracing Christian values and civilized behavior. I am Christian, Hope said simply. My father taught me about Jesus, who said we should love our neighbors and help those in need. I also know the stories my Apache grandmother told me about living in harmony with all of creation. Both teachings tell me to be kind, honest, and helpful to others. Hope paused, looking directly into Mrs. Pemberton's eyes with the confidence of someone secure in her own identity. I speak English and Apache. I can read and write. I understand mathematics and history. I help my father manage our ranch. I care for sick animals. And I teach other children about both Apache and Anglo ways of life. The young girl's poise and articulation seemed to unnerve Mrs. Pemberton, who had clearly expected to encounter a problem child rather than an eloquent young lady. If that doesn't make me American, Hope continued, then maybe your definition needs to be bigger. The simple wisdom of Hope's response drew murmurs of approval from many of the townspeople who had gathered for the meeting. Over the years, they had watched Hope grow from a frightened refugee into a remarkable young woman who had earned their respect and affection through her character and contributions to the community. But Mrs. Pemberton was not easily deterred from her mission. Child, you've obviously been coached to give appealing responses, but the fact remains that your presence here represents a dangerous precedent. If we allow white families to adopt Indian children without proper oversight, it undermines the entire federal program of Indian education and assimilation. Sam felt his temper rising at the woman's dismissive attitude toward his daughter, but Hope placed a calming hand on his arm before he could respond. Mrs. Pemberton, Hope said with the dignity that had become her trademark, I would like to tell you a story that my Apache grandmother told me before she died. Mrs. Pemberton looked as if she wanted to object, but the crowd's obvious interest in hearing Hope speak made interruption difficult. Grandmother said that long ago, the Creator made all peoples from the same earth, but gave them different gifts so they could help each other. Hope began, her voice carrying the musical quality that emerged when she shared Apache stories. Some people were given the gift of growing corn, others the gift of making tools, others the gift of healing with plants. Hope paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. Grandmother said that when people shared their gifts with each other, everyone became stronger and wiser. But when people tried to force others to give up their gifts and become exactly the same, everyone became weaker and poorer. The simple parable seemed to resonate with the audience in ways that complex arguments about policy and procedure could not. Hope had presented a vision of diversity as strength rather than threat, of cultural exchange as enrichment rather than contamination. My Apache family gave me the gift of understanding nature and respecting all living things, Hope continued. My father gave me the gift of education and the knowledge that love has no boundaries. I am stronger because I have both gifts, and I can help other people understand that being different doesn't mean being wrong. Mrs. Pemberton's face had grown increasingly red during Hope's presentation, clearly frustrated by the child's refusal to conform to her expectations of what an Indian ward should be. Young lady, Mrs. Pemberton said stiffly, "Your pretty speeches cannot disguise the fundamental problem here. You are an Indian child being raised outside proper federal oversight. This arrangement violates established policy and must be corrected." It was Sam who provided the response that would end the confrontation and secure their family's future. "Mrs. Pemberton," Sam said, rising from his seat with the quiet authority that came from absolute conviction, "let me make something very clear. Hope is not an Indian child being raised by a white family. She is my daughter, my beloved, cherished, irreplaceable daughter, who happens to have been born Apache." Sam moved to stand beside Hope, placing his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of protection and pride. "She is not a policy problem to be solved or a precedent to be worried about. She is a remarkable young woman who has survived tragedy, embraced opportunity, and become exactly the kind of person this territory needs more of." Sam looked around the room at the faces of his neighbors, people who had watched Hope grow and flourish over the past 3 years. "This child has taught our community about courage, about bridging differences, about the fact that family is built on love rather than just bloodlines. If your policies can't accommodate that kind of success, then your policies are wrong." The confrontation came to an unexpected climax when Judge Patricia Hammond, who had been observing the proceedings from the back of the room, stood up to address the gathering. "Mrs. Pemberton," Judge Hammond said with the authority of someone who had spent years balancing law with justice, "I've had the opportunity to observe this family for 3 years now, and I can state categorically that Hope Garrett represents one of the most successful examples of child welfare and development I've seen in my career." Judge Hammond walked to the front of the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. "This child has been loved, educated, and nurtured in ways that honor both her heritage and her potential. She demonstrates remarkable intelligence, strong, moral character, and the kind of cultural confidence that produces effective leaders." The judge looked directly at Mrs. Pemberton. "If your concern is truly for the welfare of Indian children, then you should be studying this arrangement as a model to be emulated, not a problem to be eliminated." Faced with legal authority, community support, and the obvious evidence of Hope's remarkable development, Mrs. Pemberton was forced to retreat from her position. But as she prepared to leave the territory, she made one final attempt to assert her authority. "Mr. Garrett," she said coldly, "this matter is not closed. I'll be recommending that federal authorities conduct a full investigation of this arrangement. You may find that your attachment to this child will not be sufficient to protect her from proper placement." Hope, who had listened to this threat with the calm attention she brought to all challenges, stepped forward to address Mrs. Pemberton directly. "Mum," Hope said with quiet dignity, "you seem to think that my father's love for me is some kind of weakness that can be overcome by government pressure, but you don't understand what real family means." Hope looked up at Sam with eyes that shone with absolute trust and love. "My father found me when I was lost and alone and afraid. He called me his daughter before he even knew my name. He has loved me, protected me, and helped me become the best version of myself." She turned back to Mrs. Pemberton with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place. "In the world, that kind of love doesn't break under pressure, ma'am. It gets stronger, and no government policy is more powerful than a father's love for his daughter." 10 years later, when Hope graduated from the Territorial Teachers College with highest honors and began her career as an educator specializing in bicultural education, the speech she gave at the graduation ceremony was attended by hundreds of people from both Apache and Anglo communities. "My fellow graduates," Hope said, looking out at an audience that included her proud father, "we have the opportunity to build a world where differences are celebrated rather than feared, where children are valued for their potential rather than limited by their origins." She paused, her eyes finding Sam in the crowd and smiling at the man who had given her everything. "I stand before you today as living proof that love recognizes no boundaries, that family is a choice rather than an accident, and that sometimes the most profound relationships begin with someone willing to see beyond the surface to the heart beneath." As the audience erupted in applause, Sam felt tears of pride and joy stream down his weathered cheeks. The frightened, child he had found hiding under a wagon had become a confident young woman ready to change the world, and he had been privileged to witness and nurture every step of her remarkable journey. After the ceremony, as Sam and Hope walked together toward the celebration that their extended community had organized in her honor, Hope took her father's arm with the comfortable affection that had characterized their relationship from the very beginning. "Father," Hope said softly, "do you remember what you told me the day you found me? You said I was your daughter before you even knew my name." "I remember," Sam replied, his heart still amazed by the truth of those words. "I want you to know that from the moment you called me daughter, I knew I was home," Hope said. "Not because you gave me shelter or food or safety, but because you saw me, really saw me, and loved exactly what you found." Sam stopped walking and turned to face his daughter, this remarkable woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering. "Hope, you gave me just as much. You taught me that love doesn't need time to develop, that family doesn't require similar backgrounds, and that sometimes the most important word you can speak is daughter, even when you don't know anything else about someone except that they need to hear it." As they continued toward the celebration, surrounded by a community that had learned to see beyond differences to the love that united this unusual but unbreakable family, Sam reflected on the moment that had changed everything. He had found an Apache girl hiding under his wagon in the rain, cold and alone and desperate. But in that instant, when he first looked into her frightened eyes, he had seen something that defied all logic and convention. He had seen his daughter, and when he called her by that name, daughter, he hadn't been giving her an identity. He had been recognizing one that already existed, acknowledging a bond that transcended time and circumstance and cultural differences. Their love story had proven that sometimes the most powerful word in any language is daughter, spoken with absolute conviction by someone whose heart has instantly recognized its match. Sam had found Hope hiding under a wagon in the rain, but more than that, he had found the missing piece of his soul, the child who had been waiting for him just as surely as he had been waiting for her. They had both been alone, but they were alone no more in finding each other. They had discovered that family isn't about sharing the same blood or coming from the same place. It's about hearts that recognize each other instantly and completely, about love that needs no explanation or justification, about the simple miracle of calling someone daughter or father, and meaning it with every fiber of your being. As the celebration continued around them, with laughter and music from the cultures blending into something new and beautiful, Sam understood that some of the most important moments in life come disguised as accidents: a frightened child seeking shelter, a lonely man checking on his property, a moment of recognition that changed everything. He had found her hiding under a wagon in the rain, then called her daughter, and in that instant, both their real lives had begun.